Welcome to First Look, Washington Post Live's one-stop shop for news and analysis. I'm Jonathan Capehart, associate editor at the Washington Post. Two big stories involving Ukraine. First, a secret meeting in Kyiv between CIA Chief Bill Burns and President Zelensky. Then, in Germany, U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin meets with his German counterpart as the two nations tussle over tanks for Ukrainian defense. Joining me now, Ukrainian bureau chief for the Washington Post, Isabel Khurshudyan. And please tell me I pronounced your last name correctly, Isabel.
That's
I tried.
perfect. Right.
Perfect. Great. So, Isabel, welcome back to First Look. Let's dive into this exclusive reporting by the Washington Post about CIA Director Bill Burns' meeting with Ukrainian President Zelensky today in Kyiv. What was the purpose of the meeting, and what are the Ukrainians taking away from that meeting?
Yeah, well, the last time he was in Kyiv about a year ago, it was to warn Ukraine of what Russia was going to do, how it was going to be a full-scale invasion. Some of the things he told them were so specific, threats to Zelensky's life, the attack on Gostomel Airport where Russian paratroopers were trying to land. So they take him pretty seriously now, and it was kind of similar this time, according to John Hudson's reporting, where he shared Russian military plans and kind of, what the intelligence is saying. I think the Ukrainians really appreciate it, and because they now know that obviously that U.S. intelligence is quite reliable, and I think they see it as another signal of the U.S. support under the Biden administration.
So they see that as a signal of support from the Biden administration, but it's a great segue to what's happening in Germany, or what's been happening in Germany in terms of the conversations the meetings that have been happening between Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin and his German counterpart in Berlin. Talk about what's going on here. Why the tussle over tanks? Why won't Germany release the tanks that are in other European countries? And why is the United States so resistant to do what the Germans want?
Yeah, this is a tricky one because really the Germans are saying, you know, Washington, you have to be the first. And this is a line that Washington does not want to cross. It does not want to send Abrams tanks. It is willing to send Bradleys, Strykers. Those are, armored personnel carriers, infantry fighting vehicles. But tanks is sort of a line they don't want to cross. They don't see them as suitable for the terrain here. They're very complicated to train on. There's proprietary sort of systems on there that would have to be, really removed. Uh, it's just very complicated. Whereas the German tanks they see as, better for the Ukrainians. But I don't know if Germany is going to be able to resist the political pressure to allow a country like Poland to send the Leopards it has. They're, that German tank that are already in the Polish stock. So I think this is an ongoing thing. It's already been going on for months, but pressure is mounting for the Germans, and I do think eventually they will relent. The signals right now are they're still saying no, but the Poles have been pretty firm that we'll send them anyway. So I don't know how exactly that's going to work, but there is a lot of pressure on the Germans specifically right now.
Um, Earlier in the week, there was a helicopter crash. This happened on Wednesday in a suburb of Kyiv, which killed Ukraine's interior minister and at least 16 others. What do we know about the circumstances of that crash?
Not that much. I mean, I can tell you that that morning in Kyiv, it was incredibly foggy. The weather was quite bad. Obviously, you have a situation in Ukraine right now where there are periodic power outages. And so it's possible that, a light that should have been on or would normally be on was off. The SBU, Ukraine's main internal security service, is looking into three different, scenarios of what could have happened in its investigation. That's that someone intentionally sabotaged the helicopter, a violation of flight safety rules, which could include weather conditions, or just a technical malfunction. But obviously, in a country that sees a lot of human loss every single day, for something like that to happen, it was just another real, sort of emotional blow to people here.
Mhm. I want to make sure I was listening to you carefully. I didn't hear one of the scenarios being that perhaps or maybe the helicopter was shot down by the Russians. Have Ukrainian officials completely ruled that out?
Yeah, that's pretty impossible. I mean, the Russians, the helicopter came down right outside of the Kiev region. For it to be shot down by an air defense system, you would have to have Russians on that territory, which they're not. Um, and the only scenario that would have been possible where it gets shot down is if the Ukrainians accidentally shot it down themselves. But I think that's been ruled out based on kind of the circumstances of the crash.
There are reports that Russian President Vladimir Putin is set to announce another large mobilization of forces. If that happens, how would that change the nature of its war on Ukraine?
I think the Ukrainians are expecting that to happen. That's obviously a lot more people, which is difficult. This is sort of Russia preparing for potentially a long war, and it knows that in a battle of attrition, it has the advantage over Ukraine because it does have more resources. But we actually had an interview today with the head of military intelligence here in Ukraine, Kirill Budanov, and he said they already have more people than us. They have over 300,000 people fighting in fighting us in this country right now, and we're holding our own. So yeah, if they add more, it's not great, but they don't have the weapons other than giving them guns. They don't have the weapons to really support that mass of people. That's something that we've kind of already seen glimpses of. That Russia even has to turn to Iran for you know self-detonating drones. That it's looking at buying rockets and other kind of ammunition abroad. So that does start to show some signs of maybe its own stocks deteriorating a year in.
Um, Last question before I have to let you go. The invasion hits its 1 year mark on February 24th. You're there in Ukraine. What is the mood of the Ukrainian people today compared to nearly a year ago?
Yeah, I think people are naturally exhausted. It's incredibly tiring every single day when there's news of loss of life, whether it's soldiers, civilians. I think within that, though, there is an incredible resilience and determination. If these Russian missile strikes on critical infrastructure and civilian targets, to make the average Ukrainian's life much harder, was supposed to sort of break the Ukrainian spirit. I think it has made people just even more angry, even more determined, even more sort of set to say, um, we are not going to give up and we're willing to fight this as long as we have to fight this, to just make this be the end and win. So I think that's the general mood you hear, is that people are incredibly angry. They hate Russia, but they're also tired.
Isabel Kashurian, Ukraine bureau chief for the Washington Post. Thank you very much for coming back to First Look.
Thank you.
We're going to keep the conversation going with the Opinions Roundtable in just a moment. Let's go to the opinion side of the Washington Post, where we will find Washington Post deputy opinion editor David Vondrele and Washington Post columnist Eugene Robinson. David, Gene, welcome back to First Look.
Thanks, Jonathan.
Great to be here.
All right, so David, I think this is only your second time on First Look, so I'm going to come to you first and just get your initial thoughts on the Post's exclusive reporting today about the CIA chief's secret meeting. Well, he traveled there secretly; it's not so secret. His meeting with the Ukrainian president.
Well, I think this is incredibly important. It's a signal that we're in it to win it alongside the Ukrainian people. It's also a reminder, I believe, to Vladimir Putin of just how much we know about every conversation he has, every plan that he makes, every step that he takes. We are watching him, and we have we have an ability to get inside his world, get inside his head, and immediately communicate that to the Ukrainians. We did it last February. We're doing it again now, and it's one just hopes over and over again that at some point Vladimir Putin is going to wake up to the hopelessness situation.
hmm And Gene, what do you make of the tank tussle between
Mm.
Germany and the United States, where the Germans are saying, "We'll send our tanks if, but only if the United States will send its tanks." What do you make of that?
Well, on one level, it's a good thing that the Germans have a complicated relationship with the idea of sending tanks across Europe. That's that
Actually, yes, that's a good point.
that shouldn't be an easy thing for Germany. More broadly, though, uh, Germany has, it has, I think, will continue these halting steps that it has been taking. It's problematic for German society to think of being militaristic, and to think of participating even second or third hand in a big war in Europe. And and so that's difficult. But it sounds as if the Ukrainians are going to get the tanks at some point. It's just kind of getting to yes
hmm
on the part of the Germans, and it's taken them some time. Your conversation about intelligence, though, I mean, to me, it really points out how vital U.S. intelligence has been throughout the war, not just before the war, but in fact all year. The United States has been providing sort of battlefield intelligence to
hmm
Ukraine that has made a huge difference in the Ukrainians' ability to anticipate and to strike back.
David, one more question on Ukraine. During the midterms last year, late last year, now Speaker of the House, Kevin McCarthy, said Republicans wouldn't write, quote, a blank check to Ukraine if Republicans ran the House. Well, they are now in the majority. Do you think they will actually follow through on that?
Um, I doubt it. I think there might be some uh, noise from the backbench about money to Ukraine. I think it was wise of the Congress to pass a large package of military aid in the lame duck session. So there's some money there in the bank ready to go. But I believe, this effort to defend Ukraine, to prevent unlawful aggression in Europe, it's had the support of the American people and of the Europeans from the very beginning. And the leaders of Western countries have not even had to sell it very hard because people just get this situation. I think if the Republicans in the House tried to stop U.S. support for Ukraine and the message machine cranked up to sell this, that they would get run over.
I agree. Gene, yesterday, the United States Treasury began what it calls quote unquote extraordinary measures to avoid
Mhm.
defaulting on its debt. How in danger is the United States of actually defaulting?
So we've been here before. There is always a period of several months, it seems, when the Treasury can do, I don't know, hocus pocus or sleight of hand or whatever it does to avoid actually hitting the debt ceiling as opposed to just technically hitting it, which I guess we did on the 19th. But um, uh, this is serious, serious business. The United States cannot possibly be allowed to default on its debt. That would be a disaster for the U.S. economy, a disaster for the world economy. It is actually unthinkable um, for for it to be a serious possibility. Yet it is a possibility. I kind of doubt it will happen, but I've doubted things in the last few years would happen that actually did happen. So this is going to take a real effort, and it's going to take building some consensus in a body the House of Representatives, where there isn't a lot of consensus.
I think we're all old enough to remember what went down in 2011 when we had the first major, serious debt ceiling crisis this country faced. And the Republican Party then was ruled by the Tea Party. And these were folks who were all about fiscal rectitude and everything. This cast of folks who are in the Republican majority make the Tea Party folks seem reasonable. So, David, Republicans are insisting on major spending cuts before the debt limit is raised again. The White House says it won't negotiate on this. The same stance that President Obama took 12 years ago, considering the debt limit must be raised for money Congress has already spent so that the United States doesn't dine and dash. Should future spending cuts and a debt limit increase even be part of the same conversation?
Well, they should be, could be, they will be part of the same conversation, and some kind of face-saving compromise will have to be arrived at to move a few Republican votes into the column with the Democratic minority to get this done. It will happen. The position that Speaker McCarthy has set forth is completely untenable. He says that all the spending cuts have to come from non-defense and non-Medicare and non-Social Security. He doesn't want to touch any of the popular programs. Well, that leaves about $1 trillion of spending, and the deficit's $1 trillion. It hit that mark under Donald Trump and remains there. In other words, to get to zero, as some of the Republicans are talking about, they'd have to cut everything. Well, that's a lot of popular programs. That's the Farm Bill that is untouchable in the red states. That's property tax exemptions. That's all sorts of extremely popular programs, and they can't go there. So this will get done, but there'll have to be some kind of a give back so that the Republicans who make the deal ultimately are able to sell it to their voters.
Well, I mean, you're a whole lot more optimistic than I am, David. But Gene, as I'm listening to David, I'm just wondering. I remember just looking at my Twitter thing. I remember seeing a tweet just before we went on from someone who makes the suggestion. You know what Democrats should do? They should agree to all the concessions that the Republicans want, to get the deal. And then when it comes time to vote for it, vote against all of them and make the Republicans eat the pain that would come from that. I mean, on a gut level, I'm like, yeah, that's kind of gangsta, but does it make sense?
I'm not sure that makes sense. I don't think playing. I don't think anybody ought to play games here. David is probably right that there's going to have to be some face-saving, in quotes, concessions that allow some members to go home. I hope that's right, actually, because my worry is how many Andy Biggses are there in the Republican caucus. Andy Biggs says he will never, ever vote to increase the debt ceiling, full stop. And he won't. I'm sure he'll vote against it, whatever happens. And so it doesn't take but a handful of those to then make it incumbent on Kevin McCarthy to get this through with the support of Democrats and some Republicans willing to take that vote, and that gets McCarthy in trouble with his caucus. That puts his job as Speaker in jeopardy because any one member of his caucus can move to oust him. So it's very complicated for him, and this would be a tough needle for someone with the skills of Nancy Pelosi to thread. I worry about Kevin McCarthy's skill set and whether he can, get that piece of thread through the eye of that needle.
Right, right. Let's switch gears and talk about the Biden classified documents situation. Yesterday in California, the president was asked about it. He spoke for the first time since the second pages of documents were found last week. The president said he has quote no regrets about not disclosing documents quickly. Washington Post had an incredible TikTok with new information in the paper yesterday. Gene, you wrote a column saying there are major differences between the Biden document case and the Trump document case. There are a lot of differences. Just give the number one difference.
The number one difference is that Trump kept a lot of classified documents and refused to give them back, refused to let anybody know what he had for more than a year, and he had a lot of documents. Whereas President Biden and his team, when they discovered they had in their possession classified documents, they immediately reported them, turned them back in, and have been open and cooperative and have been looking for more. I hope by this point they've looked in the attic and in the basement and wherever else there could possibly be documents, because those differences do not fully cancel out the commonality, which is that in both cases, classified documents that were not supposed to be outside of secure places were kept in secure places, were not handled in the proper way. Huge difference in degree, huge difference in intent, but that central thing happened in both cases.
And David, as I was reading through the story yesterday with the new TikTok of what happened and why it happened, the thing that one of the foundations of the story is, there seems to be a tension between the legal requirements that the Biden administration is under in terms of how to handle these documents, how to even talk about these documents, and the Justice Department's involvement. And then there's the PR problem that is causing the administration and causing the headache for the administration and allowing Republicans to conflate the two cases, the Trump classified case and the Biden classified documents case and the Biden classified documents case. Do you see the pushback, if you disagree, that that what we are seeing here in the case of Biden, PR versus legal strategies bumping up against each other?
You know, this is a non-journalist thing to say, but I'm really concerned about us getting out over our skis on this story. We don't know what the Biden people actually knew or when they knew it about these documents. I mean, somehow somebody decided that some of these papers should go to the Penn Biden Center, others should go to the garage next to the Corvette, others should be inside the house. Why did they make those decisions? Did they make those decisions without knowing what was in the boxes? If they opened the boxes, how did they go through the papers and decide where they should go without noticing that some of them had classified markings on them? So I don't know the answers to any of those questions, but until I do, I'm a little concerned, a little reluctant to say that, 6 years after he left office, they suddenly opened the box and figured out what was inside. Maybe that's what happened, or maybe the reason there's a tension between their PR strategy and their legal strategy is they're still figuring out how much legal trouble they're in.
Gene, what do you make of what David just said?
Look, David makes an absolutely not just a good point, but the right point in that no, we do not know how the Biden documents got where they were and remained where they were, and so we will the facts we'll get the facts out. Hopefully, the administration will tell us more at some point. The special counsel, I'm sure, will delve into this, and we as journalists will be trying to report that story. So it is absolutely right that we are presently assuming facts not fully in evidence, and so we shouldn't. We should always report and not assume.
I mean,
As you know it,
if I
well,
could jump in, I mean,
real quick.
I know we're almost out of time, but what we know is that the way Donald Trump has handled his papers is wrong. We just don't know what the situation is with the Biden papers fully yet. So I'm not excusing Trump when I say let's wait and figure out what's going on with Biden.
Good point. David Von Drayling, Eugene Robinson, thank you very much for coming back to First Look. Have a good weekend.
You
Thank
too,
you,
Jonathan.
Joe.
Head to WashingtonPostLive.com to find more information about next week's interviews and to register. I'm Jonathan Capehart, Associate Editor at the Washington Post. Thank you for watching Washington Post Live's First Look.